the last of the Zephyrians. The atmospheric processes of New Geneva hummed their eternal song as Velira clutched her infant daughter against her chest, both of them hidden in the shadows of Sector 7's abandoned warehouses. The baby's 3 hearts beat rapidly, tiny bioluminescent patterns flickering across her translucent skin, a sign of distress that any Zephyrian would recognize. But there were so few left to remember. Velira's breath came in ragged gasps through her failing respirator. The warning light blinked amber, 2 hours of filtered air remaining. Around them, the ruins of what had once been a thriving interspecies district now served as hunting grounds for the Terran Authority's enforcement drones. The metallic whir of their sensors grew closer with each passing minute. Her people, the Zephyrians of the Andorian Nebula, had been masters of atmospheric manipulation for millennia. They had helped terraform dozens of worlds, their very breath capable of converting toxic atmospheres into life-sustaining environments. But their gift had become their curse when the hegemony wars began. Accused of weaponizing their abilities, they were branded as biological terrorists and hunted to near extinction. Earth's Atmospheric Control Act had sealed their fate. Only registered species with proper documentation could breathe freely here. All others required expensive permits, renewed monthly, with each breath monitored and rationed. For refugees like Velira, there was no legal pathway to survival. The baby stirred, her small lungs struggling with Earth's nitrogen-heavy atmosphere. Zephyrian infants needed specialized gas mixtures for their first year of life, something the black market dealers knew all too well. Velira had traded her thermal cloak for 3 days' worth of infant breathing supplements, her emergency beacon for a week's worth of her own filtered air, and her mother's memory crystal, containing the last songs of their homeworld, for information about the human sanctuary hidden somewhere in the lower city. Thunder echoed overhead as a patrol ship passed, its scanning beams cutting through the perpetual smog. Velira pressed herself deeper into the shadows, feeling the cold metal of the warehouse wall against her back. Her daughter's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to deep purple, the color of hunger and fear. "Sha, little starlight," she whispered. In their native tongue, the words creating tiny sparkles of light in the polluted air. "Mother will find a way." But as the amber warning light on her respirator shifted to red, Velira knew the truth. She had perhaps an hour left, maybe less. Her daughter needed sanctuary now, not tomorrow, not in some hopeful future where the laws might change. Now, the decision crystallized in her mind like ice forming on a dying star's surface. She would give everything, her remaining breath, her life, her future, to ensure her daughter survived. It was what any mother would do, even if it meant she would never see her child's first steps on solid ground. The underground network Dr. Marcus Holloway had seen many desperate cases in his 15 years running the Sanctuary Project, but none quite like the Zephyrian mother who materialized from the storm drains beneath sublevel sea. His hidden medical facility, carved into the abandoned subway tunnels of Old Manhattan, had become a lifeline for undocumented aliens seeking refuge from the Terran Authority's increasingly harsh enforcement policies. "Her respiratory system is failing," announced Nix Okafor, his head medic, as they examined Velira in the dim light of their makeshift emergency bay. "Classic signs of atmospheric poisoning. She's been breathing unfiltered Earth air for weeks." Velira's translator device crackled with static as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My daughter, she needs a sanctuary. I have payment." With trembling hands, she produced a collection of items that made Holloway's heart sink: a military-grade energy cell, a navigation crystal worth a fortune on the outer colonies, and most heartbreaking of all, her own vocal processor, the device that allowed her to communicate with other species. "We don't take payment for saving lives," Holloway said gently, but Velira shook her head violently. "You don't understand," she gasped, her bioluminescent throat patterns flickering erratically. "She cannot survive Earth atmosphere without genetic modification. The procedure costs everything." Holloway exchanged glances with Tomoko Yamazaki, their resident geneticist. Zephyrian children required complex atmospheric adaptation. Therapy to survive on oxygen-rich worlds, a process that took months and required rare medical supplies. The kind of supplies that only the most well-funded facilities could afford. "There might be another way," Yamazaki said quietly. "The Kelvin station has been developing new atmospheric adaptation techniques. But the transport alone would cost." "I know someone," interrupted Zara Petrov, their communications specialist, emerging from the shadows. As a former smuggler, she maintained contacts throughout the underground network. Captain Hendricks runs medical supplies to the outer colonies. She owes me a favor, but... She paused, studying Valera's deteriorating condition. It would require immediate departure. Tonight. Valera's respirator alarm began beeping frantically. The red warning light cast eerie shadows on the tunnel walls. Then we go, she said, struggling to her feet. My daughter must reach safety. Holloway said gently, you understand what this means. The journey to Kelvin Station takes 3 days. You don't have enough air for, I know. Valera's voice was perfectly calm, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to the pale gold that Zephyrians displayed in moments of absolute resolve. My breath becomes hers. My life becomes her future. The medical team fell silent. They had witnessed many sacrifices in their work, but this level of maternal devotion transcended species boundaries. In the distance, the sound of enforcement drones grew louder, their search patterns drawing ever closer to the hidden sanctuary. There's no time, Petrov announced, checking her secure communication device. Hendricks can meet us at Docking Bay. 7 in 20 minutes. After that, her window closes. As they prepared for the desperate journey, none of them could have imagined that this moment would become the catalyst for changing humanity's understanding of what it truly meant to be civilized. The sacrifice Captain Lydia Hendricks had smuggled everything from Martian terraforming equipment to Centauri silk, but she had never transported a dying mother and her infant through Earth's heavily patrolled atmosphere. Her ship, the Meridian's Grace, was built for speed and stealth, not comfort, and certainly not for medical emergencies. Atmospheric breach in 30 seconds, announced her pilot, Kai Nakamura, as they approached the edge of Earth's defensive grid. All hands, prepare for acceleration. In the cargo hold, converted hastily into a medical bay, Valera lay connected to the ship's emergency life support system. Her own respirator had failed an hour ago, and now she survived on borrowed time and borrowed breath. Beside her, baby Lyshira slept peacefully in a specialized atmospheric chamber, unaware that each of her tiny breaths was purchased with her mother's life. Dr. Evelyn Cross, the ship's medic, monitored both patients with growing concern. Her cellular oxygen levels are dropping faster than anticipated, she reported to Captain Hendricks through the comm system. The atmospheric poisoning has accelerated. She might not survive the journey to Kelvin Station. Valera's eyes fluttered open, the bioluminescent patterns around them dimming to barely visible whispers of light. Through her translator, now running on backup power, she managed to speak. How much a time? 6 hours to Kelvin Station, Cross replied honestly. Your current oxygen levels suggest perhaps 3 hours remaining. A sound escaped Valera's throat, something between a laugh and a sob. In Zephyrian culture, it was called morthak, the sound of joyful grief, made when one found beauty in sacrifice. Enough, she whispered. More than enough. She turned her head toward her daughter's chamber, where Lyshira's tiny form was surrounded by the specialized atmospheric mixture that kept her alive. The infant's bioluminescent patterns were strong and steady, the deep blue of contentment and health. Captain, Valera called weakly. Through the ship's intercom, her voice reached the bridge where Hendricks was navigating through an asteroid field to avoid patrol ships. Promise me something. Anything, Hendricks replied, her own voice thick with emotion. When the authorities who ask questions, tell them she is mine. Tell them I gave everything so she could breathe free. The ship shuddered as they passed through a gravitational anomaly. In the medical bay, Cross watched as Valera slowly disconnected herself from the life support system, redirecting every molecule of precious oxygen to her daughter's chamber. What are you doing? Cross demanded, moving to restore the connections. Valera's hand caught her wrist with surprising strength. Giving her my breath, she said simply. All of it. Forever. 4. The next 2 hours, Valera lay in the dim cargo hold, watching her daughter sleep. She sang the ancient lullabies of her people, her voice growing fainter with each verse, creating tiny sparks of light that danced around the baby's chamber like captured stars. When Captain Hendricks finally docked at Kelvin Station, she found Valera still watching her daughter, a peaceful smile on her lips, her bioluminescent patterns frozen in the pale gold of ultimate love. The baby was breathing perfectly, surrounded by enough atmospheric mixture to last for months. The sacrifice was complete. The viral Truth News anchor Rachel Morrison had covered interstellar politics for 20 years. But nothing had prepared her for the footage that arrived at the Galactic Broadcasting Network 3 days after the incident at Kelvin Station. The recording, made by Captain Hendricks Ship Systems, showed the final hours of Valeera's life in heartbreaking detail. "This is what we've become," Morrison said to her producer, Jake Sullivan, as they reviewed the material in their editing bay high above New Geneva's skyline. "We've created a system so cruel that mothers literally give their last breath to save their children." The story broke during the evening news cycle, but within hours it had spread across every communication network in human space. The image of Valeera disconnecting her own life support to give her daughter more time became the most shared piece of media in galactic history. On Lunar Colony, Governor Patricia Wells watched the broadcast in her office, surrounded by advisors who had spent years crafting the Atmospheric Control Act. "The public response is intense," reported her communications director, David Park. "Protest gatherings on 17 worlds. The Centauri Senate is calling for emergency hearings. What do our polling numbers look like?" Wells asked, though she already knew the answer from the grim expressions around the table. 73% of humans now support immediate reform of the atmospheric laws, Park replied. 89% specifically support granting citizenship to the Zephyr child. The hashtag Valeera's breath is trending across all networks. Meanwhile, at the Kelvin Station Medical Facility, Dr. Amara Singh worked around the clock to complete baby Lyshira's atmospheric adaptation therapy. The facility had been flooded with donations from across human space, medical supplies, funding, and volunteer support staff. Most significantly, the Terran Authority had quietly suspended all deportation orders for Zephyr refugees pending a comprehensive review of current policies. "The genetic modifications are taking hold perfectly," Singh reported to the growing crowd of journalists and officials who had gathered at the station. "She's adapting to Earth's normal atmosphere ahead of all projections. Her mother's sacrifice has given her not just life, but a future." On Earth, in the hidden tunnels beneath Old Manhattan, Dr. Marcus Holloway watched the news coverage with mixed emotions. The Sanctuary Project was no longer needed, at least not for Zephyrians. The public outcry had forced immediate policy changes, and refugee processing centers were being established on 12 different worlds. "Valeera would be proud," said Nick Okafor, joining him in the abandoned medical bay where they had first met the dying mother. "Her daughter won't just survive, she's changing everything." The transformation wasn't limited to policy changes. Across human space, children began learning about Zephyr culture in school. Universities established xenobiology programs focused on atmospheric adaptation. Most importantly, the concept of atmospheric rights entered human legal discourse. For the first time, religious leaders of multiple species held joint ceremonies honoring Valeera's sacrifice. Artists created memorials on 17 worlds. Musicians composed symphonies that attempted to capture the sound of her final lullabies, but perhaps the most significant change was happening in homes across human space, where parents held their children a little tighter and asked themselves, "What would I sacrifice to ensure my child could breathe free?" The answer, increasingly, was everything. And in that answer, humanity began to discover what it truly meant to be civilized. The ambassador's legacy. 15 years after her mother's sacrifice, Ambassador Lyshira Velarin stood before the Galactic Council on Kepler Station, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through the full spectrum of Zephyr diplomatic colors. At 19, she was the youngest being ever to address the assembled representatives of 47 worlds, but her presence commanded absolute attention. "My mother gave me her last breath so that I might speak these words today," she began, her voice carrying the musical tones that had made Zephyrian languages so beloved throughout the galaxy. But she gave humanity something far greater, the opportunity to remember what it means to be truly civilized. In the audience, Captain Lydia Hendricks wiped tears from her eyes. Now serving as the Terran Authority's Director of Refugee Services, she had watched Lyshira grow from a struggling infant into the most influential diplomat of her generation. Beside her sat Dr. Evelyn Cross, who had become Lyshira's adoptive guardian and had taught her both human and Zephyr customs. "The atmospheric accord we ratify today ensures that no child will ever again face the choice my mother faced," Lyshira continued, her patterns now displaying the deep gold of triumph mixed with the silver of remembrance. "No parent will sacrifice their breath so their child might live among strangers. The accord was revolutionary. Atmospheric adaptation would become a universal right, funded jointly by all member worlds. Refugee processing would be standardized across species lines. Most importantly, the document established the principle that survival itself could never be commodified. President Chen Xiaoli of Earth raised her hand to speak. Ambassador Lyshira, there are still some who question whether humanity can truly integrate so many different species. What would you say to them? Lyshira's laugh created tiny sparkles of light in the chamber's atmosphere, a sound that had become famous across human space. Honored President, I am living proof that integration is not just possible, but essential. I breathe Earth's air because human doctors saved my life. I understand diplomacy because human teachers educated me. I speak for peace because human families raised me. She paused, her patterns shifting to the deep blue of profound truth. But I remember my heritage because humanity chose to honor my mother's sacrifice rather than forget it. That is the greatest integration of all, when we preserve what makes us different while celebrating what makes us the same. The vote was unanimous, 47 worlds, 47 species, all in agreement. After the ceremony, Lyshira stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars where her mother's homeworld had once existed. The Andorian Nebula was dark. Now, its planets uninhabitable, but Zephyrian culture lived on in the colonies scattered across human space. Dr. Marcus Holloway joined her at the viewport. Now in his 70s, he served as head of the Velira Foundation, which provided support for refugee families throughout the galaxy. Your mother would be proud, he said simply. She is proud, Lyshira replied, her patterns showing the soft green of certainty. Zephyrians believe that love transcends physical death. Every breath I take carries her love forward into the universe. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Lyshira activated her personal communicator to find a hologram of a young human girl, perhaps 8 years old, standing in what appeared to be a classroom. Ambassador Lyshira. My name is Emma Chen, and my class is studying the atmospheric accord. We wanted to thank you for making sure all kids can breathe safely, no matter what planet they are from. Behind Emma, dozens of children from multiple species waved enthusiastically. Human, Zephyrian, Centauri, even a few young Andromedans with their distinctive crystalline features. My teacher says your mommy was a hero, Emma continued. I think you're a hero too. As Lyshira closed the connection, her bioluminescent patterns cycled through every color in the Zephyrian emotional spectrum: joy, sadness, hope, determination, and finally, the rare prismatic display that represented perfect love, somewhere. In the quantum foam that connected all things, a mother's sacrifice continued to echo across the stars, creating ripples of compassion that would last for generations. Her daughter could breathe free, and so could all the children who would come after.